Welcome to another episode of the Spurs Takeover. I'm your host, Joe Garcia, and we're going to be joined by our co host and good friend here, Steven Anderson. And we were laughing. We had some good laughs before we came out here. We can't really divulge the conversation, but shenanigans, man. Shenanigans happen before we come on
Yeah.
air. I had a phone call from one of my friends right before we went live, and Steven kind of caught that conversation. I'm telling you, man, I got the
Yep.
weirdest friends, dude. Well, either way, we're happy and ecstatic. Hey, what's up, Michael? Because the Spurs they winded up getting a win in OT, their second OT game. Back to back OT game against the Sacramento Kings here. And final score was 105 to 104. Again, this was a game where I think pretty much everybody said, here we go again. This Spurs team is going to lose this one. Why, WTF moment of the game was why the hell was Marco Beninelli on the court with 3 minutes, less than 3 minutes left on the court, on the clock, should I say? And we didn't see Jakob Portal enter the game. We could use his defense because the Spurs couldn't get a stop. But lo and behold, as the hate flew, very heavily from one Marco Beninelli, including myself, what does he do? He goes and hits a game tying shot at the end of regulation that sends this game into overtime. So everybody's like, well, some Spurs fans were saying, oh, where are the Marco Beninelli haters now? I'm still here. I ain't gone nowhere. Marco's going to have his, decent games here and there, but they're not
Yeah.
consistent. So, he's still to me Hill Country Fair brand, so don't believe the hype or that sorcery he's trying to, you know, put out there to everybody and get him under his spell. I'd rather much see some Lonnie Walker or Damari Carroll fill those minutes. But needless to say, the Spurs winded up getting a win. So, Steven, what can you tell us about this? How did they come back from being almost left for dead to get back into this game?
Well, they were playing the Sacramento Kings, so that kind of helps. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
uh,
just a little.
yeah, so that does help. I mean, Sacramento had the better looks in the overtime. Sacramento had a lot of better scoring opportunities. I mean, especially at the end, they had like four offensive rebounds at the end to win the game. They just could not get a bucket to fall. Spurs were very fortunate to get the win. It was an ugly win. I mean, I think fans will take it at this point because of how bad the season's gone for them so far. But I mean, they'll take it as of right now. How did the Spurs get the win? I mean, just team basketball. Nobody on the Spurs tonight had 20 points or more, Joe. Just going off the box score right now, Ulrich 19, DeRozan 15, Murray 14, Matt Mills and Jakob 13 each, Marco 11. And, you know, that's again, we talked about the Spurs rotations. We talked about this time and time again. And I think Pop is just going to tinker with what works for each particular game. I'm not sure he's even going to have a set rotation because we're now 20 games in and we're seeing just different rotations, different players on the court at different times. Not ideal, but I mean,
No.
if you're getting wins, and I mean, even it's an ugly win, I'll take it. Like I said, but moving forward, if you're going to play, you know, Lakers, Clippers, Boston, some of those top teams, Milwaukee, you can't have games like this. And the Spurs, unfortunately, had a game that shouldn't even have been like this, Joe. The Spurs tonight, third quarter, they were outscored 30-17 in that third quarter. Going deeper into that, the Spurs had a 10-point lead at one point. They had a 10-point lead
Yeah.
twice, I believe, and you lose that lead to Sacramento. So it just shows how inconsistent they are, and it's the most mind-boggling thing. You can't figure this team out.
I think I can kind of figure out what's going on. You have
Mm,
one, Lamarcus Aldridge, entering the game again. He was out 2 games, because he had, was it thigh soreness or something of that nature. And you had
mhm,
Jakob Portal, who was playing, decent. He had some great performances defensively, out
mhm.
there, and it was making a difference in the games, And then we had Trey Lyles out there as well, making a difference in the game with his defensive effort. I thought they played admirably in the absence of Lamarcus Aldridge. Now you have Lamarcus returning to the game tonight. It kind of slows things down a little bit. The Spurs aren't as, let's say, dangerous in the open court with a Lamarcus Aldridge in tow. And then another thing happened is you let Marco Beninelli once again get heavy minutes. Yes, he went ahead and made a three-pointer which sent the game into OT. But the thing with Marco is not a defensive presence out there. And I even heard the announcers and Sean and Elliott and Bill Land once again saying, this Spurs team's not going to win this game unless they can get stops. The personnel you have out there on the court, especially in crunch time, isn't the personnel that's going to get you those stops. The guys that are going to get you the stops are out there on the bench. Again, why? Why do they keep doing this? It's beyond me. I don't understand what's going on in that regards. Is your best defensive players seem to be just out there on the bench and not being utilized the correct way in crunch time. And you're going to have situations like this that keep on happening because the Spurs just can't get those defensive stops to win the games at the end of regulation. This is an ugly win. I'll take it. But you need to
Yeah.
burn the tape and burn the highlights because there's really not much to speak of other than, hey, the
Well,
Spurs got a much needed win.
Well, I wouldn't say burn the tape. I would say keep the tape because you want to. If we know Pop and as well as we think we do, or know what he does at least, he's going to make these guys watch this film of what went wrong in that second half when you have a 10-point lead. You should never have given up the way you did. Turnovers, missed opportunities, just miscues here and there. And if you guys listen to the podcast, the Spurs cast that I did with Paul Garcia, it just came out today. You guys can find that on all of your streaming platforms, by the way. Just a nice little plug there. I even said the Spurs are inconsistent, and that's the main problem for this team. We've seen them play Houston, a very good Houston Rockets team with both James Harden and Russell Westbrook. Got to win. They played a LA Clippers team with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Got to win. So this team can beat elite teams if they play the right way. But when you're playing these bottom feeders, and I don't mean that disrespectfully at all, but if you're playing these teams that you technically should win and should beat, like a Sacramento, like a Phoenix, especially if they're in the same kind of like boat as you are, you're trying to get into the playoffs, trying to get higher in the standings, you shouldn't be playing this bad. And the fact that the Spurs are still inconsistent, 20 something games in, is kind of concerning to me because it's basically the exact same team except for DeJounte Murray and DeMarre Carroll. It's pretty, and Trey Lyles, of course. So it's pretty much the basic all around same team. Um, on that note, Joe talked about consistency. I know Spurs fans, including myself, media people out there, were all happy with Lonnie Walker finally playing well on in Wednesday's game against Houston. I was sorry, Tuesday, whenever the heck they played on. It's been so long. So I was one of those people that was very happy as well. I mean, the guy had a great game. But tonight, he played 11 minutes. He shot 25%. Didn't really have a good game on either side of the ball, really, that I had seen from what I saw. So again, it's about consistency. Does Lonnie deserve minutes? I know you and I were talking about this on Twitter before during the game. Yeah, Lonnie deserves minutes. He deserves Marco's minutes. I agree with you. I want to see him out there taking Marco's minutes and see what he can do with them. But if he is playing so inconsistently that he can't even defend well or shoot the ball well, and unfortunately, as bad as Marco is on defense, he did tonight. So that's why we saw him get those minutes over Lonnie, including Bryn Forbes. Pop just completely ripped into Bryn Forbes early in the game. Really just let him have it for just bad defense. And in that first half, he played a season low 8 minutes. So that kind of tells you where Pop's head was at tonight. And we saw a different Pop tonight with him getting after his guys. The what like to call the quote unquote old Pop. And I don't know if this is like a turning point because they won two straight, but they need these 5 days off more than anything.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me in tonight's performance was Derek White. Now, what's going on with
Hmm.
Derek White? He played a
Yes.
total of 21 minutes. He was 0 for 7, from the field, and he had 0 points on the night. He didn't really do much as far as doing anything defensively. He didn't have
Mhm.
a great game by crashing the boards. So to me, it was just like, what's going on with him? He's the starting point guard at this point because Lonnie Walker's coming off the bench, but you got to perform, and that's the issue. Just like you stated, this Spurs
Mhm.
team is consistently inconsistent, and I think
Yep.
the inconsistencies stem from much of their starters. On any given night, you can have most of their starters be inconsistent. And the one who has been, I think, really consistent this whole season has been DeMar DeRozan. Beyond
Yeah.
that, you have guys, like pretty much tonight, you have LaMarcus Aldridge, who missed 2 games, comes in, plays 35 minutes. He has 19 points, a quiet 19 points at that. Rudy Gay had 9 points on the night. And DeMar DeRozan, he was, kind of kept in check a little bit. He only had
Yeah.
15. But I think it
Hmm.
was infectious because the Spurs had some trouble, finding the basket. They had some issues tonight from the field. They weren't able to
Yeah.
knock down shots consistently. And unfortunately, they weren't able to keep the Sacramento Kings from knocking down threes. The Sacramento Kings, they had some made threes. They were right up there with the San Antonio Spurs in that stat. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull that up right now too, so we can see what the field goals. I mean, their 3 point shoots, their shooting look like. I'm looking at right now the Sacramento Kings, and on the night they connected on 9 of 34 of their 3 point attempts, and the Spurs connected on 11 of 32 of their 3 point attempts. So the
Hmm.
Spurs from beyond the arc were at 34.4%, and the Kings were at 26.5. The other night, the Spurs were able to keep the Houston Rockets at just 15 made threes, and I believe the Houston Rockets had 50 plus attempts from beyond the arc. So that's one of the stats that's standing out at me, is that the Spurs are starting to play a little bit better on the wing and getting after some of these
Yeah.
teams. But you got to contain the made threes. Like again, teams are going to go off on you, and they're just going to keep on chunking up the threes because it is part of the game now in today's NBA. But if you can
Yeah.
contain that and you can keep those made threes to a minimum, you give yourself a shot. Another thing that helped the Spurs tonight was they were the aggressors. They were going to the free throw line and they were knocking down most of their free throws as well. There were stretches there where you had Patty Mills and DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan had went 2 of 3 when he got fouled beyond the arc. Patty
Hmm.
Mills in that overtime period got fouled, and he only knocked down one of the 3 shots. I mean, that's kind
Uh,
of inexcusable in crunch time. You have the game at your at you can just put a nail in the coffin right there if you make all those shots and make it that much more interesting for the Sacramento Kings because they're a young team and the pressure is on them. And as we saw, the Sacramento Kings kind of folded under that pressure because they are a young and inexperienced team. The Spurs shine through because they have some veterans out there. Yes, I understand why Coach Pop had Marco Beninelli out there on the court. He kind of helped spread the defense because he is able to knock down a three, and he is a wily old veteran. But at the end of the day, the guy is a defensive liability, and that's why
hmm.
I get so upset when I see him out there when we need stops in critical situations. So, what do you think is going to happen in the next game, Steven? Do you think the Spurs are going to be able to carry this momentum and keep this win streak alive?
Well, first of all, I'll answer that question in 1 second. Evan Klowski, who is a reporter for Ken's Five, just tweeted this out, Joe, and I want to hear your reaction to this.
Sure.
He said Marco Bellinelli, or Marco said he was mad about not seeing minutes in a couple of games, and then he puts in parentheses, not mad at Pop, just more so he wants to help the team, and he's been struggling. It meant a lot to him to have this moment today to send the game into overtime. Pop said after the game he has confidence in him, but it was more important that Marco came through. So right there, we talked about it a few seconds ago, Joe, where Marco shouldn't be getting minutes over Lonnie. We just talked about that. But based on that quote alone, it seems, at least in my opinion, that Pop is more than likely going to go with Marco for the foreseeable future, especially after today's game, than Lonnie. What do you think?
I just think that's asinine. I don't understand why he would do that. Again, the logic is Marco is more veteran savvy. He can spread the defense a little bit because he has that 3 pointer in his arsenal and his
Hmm.
offensive arsenal. It's an off
Yeah.
balance ugly three and it's an off balance ugly shot, but more times than not it will go in. Now it won't go in consistently. That's the issue that I think all Spurs fans have with
Hmm.
Marco is his lapses on the defensive end. His inability to keep up with his defenders. And not only
Hmm.
that, but his lack of consistency on
Yeah.
a game to game basis. So you have this conundrum: either you play him, or you give those minutes to one Lonnie Walker or Damari Carroll. You can't keep going with Marco and expect him to have games like this on any given night. He's very spotty. He kind of reminds me of the microwave, from back in the day from the Spurs. I mean, the guy, he would heat up. Remember, his nickname was a
Yeah,
microwave, and he was
yeah,
a streaky shooter. That's what Marco Beninelli is. He's a streaky shooter, and he can heat up from time to time, but it's not consistent. And you need
yeah,
consistency to go ahead and carry the momentum and keep winning games. Let me
yeah.
answer a question right here. We have Anthony Bustamante. He says, "How do you feel about LA?" I'll answer that. And another question is, this game was way too close. Patty Mills needs to get traded.
Yes.
Pop needs
No.
to put Lonnie Walker because he is a good shooter.
Let's
Lonnie
talk about
Walker,
that.
yeah, Lonnie Walker and Patty Mills. We'll talk about that. LA, the way I feel about Marcus Aldridge is I think the Spurs offense slows down quite a bit when LaMarcus is out there on the floor. I think that the Spurs play a little bit faster and they're more exciting to watch when we don't have LaMarcus out there. The way I feel about LaMarcus at this juncture is I think LaMarcus, I think it's his time now. Unfortunately, I think the Spurs have him for one more season, but we can't
Hmm.
get rid of him fast enough. I just feel like he's just a liability at this point, and I have to question whether he really wants to be here or not. Because he doesn't seem to put forth the effort that he should be putting forth every single night. So you got to look at that from, you know, a standpoint as far as are you going to wind up putting that money somewhere else, and take your chances with some of these younger guys because Jakob Portal again and Trey Lyles play quite well when LaMarcus isn't in the game, but can they do it consistently? That's the big question, and if we think that we're that much better off without LaMarcus, it's yet to be proven. We've only seen him, not in the lineup for 2 games. I mean, if he got injured and let's say he missed 10 games and the Spurs went on a 10 game winning streak, then that tells you all you need to know. But I doubt that will happen in the foreseeable
Yeah,
future. But Spurs are
yeah,
faster without him.
yeah. So to answer your question from before, can the Spurs keep this momentum? I think, first of all, like I said, they need a damn break. I mean, that's what they need. I think we all
I
need one
need a
after.
damn break from these Spurs.
Yeah, so we all need a break. Let's just be real. So after they get these 5 days off, I think they'll rest, recover, look at film, practice that they haven't really had time to do much of, Joe. And I think once they do that, yeah, I think honestly, I don't even know who they play next. Is it Cleveland?
Yeah, they play the Cleveland Cavaliers next.
Okay. Okay, well, it should be a win, let's be real, because it's Cleveland, but nothing is going to be easy for this Spurs team this season. I mean,
Yeah.
if these first 20 games are any indication of that, nothing is going to be easy like it was last season or even in past seasons. I do see the Spurs winning the game. I think it's going to be another one of these pulling teeth type games where we're frustrated, we're angry, they get a lead, they lose it. It's going to be one of those games again, and it really shouldn't be. But I do think they keep the momentum. I'm interested to see if they're going to be the typical Spurs, if Spurs pass and be rusty after a few days off, kind of like how they were today. To start the game, nobody could really hit anything to start the game, and then once they got their juices flowing, they started making shots. I want to see if they're going to be rusty or not, but I think the Spurs can get a win, make it three in a row when they play Cleveland, and then after that, I don't know because I don't know who they play after that because I'm looking at one game at a time right now. So
Yeah. Well,
we'll
let's
see what
answer
happens.
this other question from Anthony Bustamante. He says, he was talking about Patty Mills. Patty Mills needs to get traded, and he said Pop needs to put Lonnie Walker in because he's a good shooter. Your rebuttal to that question from our viewer.
Okay, so the first part about Patty Mills. Patty Mills thrived in FIBA basketball play.
He
Joe, I'm
did.
sure
He
you
looked
know
good.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know that. I mean, I stayed up late watching some of those games because that's what I do. So, I did that. So I mean, he played well, and I'm thinking, where's this Patty Mills been all since he's been in San Antonio? And the answer to that question is if you look at FIBA, excuse me, in Australia, look at the national team, he is their offense. He is the focal point of their offense, and he knows that. Here in San Antonio, he's not. He's not the focal point of their offense. It is DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. So Patty's going to be have those streaky games. But to his credit, he has had a very good season this year. Patty
Yeah,
has
that he
had
has.
a very good season. So I'm not going to sit there and gripe on the guy and be like, oh, he needs to be traded because one, Pop's not going to do that. Um, if you're going to talk about veterans, Patty is the most tenured veteran on this team, alongside Marco Bellinelli and Damari Carroll and LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar. But Patty has been here the longest, I believe, of those ones I just listed off, other than I think LaMarcus. But I think Patty's been here the longest tenured Spur. So I don't see Pop trading him, just to trade him. I mean, I understand fans are frustrated. I'm frustrated watching these games too when the games like this happen. But you have to think realistically who the Spurs will get back for him, and I don't know what they would get back very much, to be honest with you.
No one's
So
going
I
to
don't
take that contract.
exactly,
He's an overpaid, undersized shooting guard who's just a role
exactly,
player coming off the bench.
exactly. No one's going to take that contract, and no one's going to take a shooter who is streaky like that. You talked about the microwave. Remember, Danny Green was called icy hot.
Oh yeah,
But the reason why Toronto took him is because of his defense. Danny Green is a very good defender. He's still look at him with the Lakers right now. He's a very good defender for the Lakers. So that's why Toronto took him on. And his shot miraculously improved ever since he left San Antonio, ironically. So yeah, so I mean, that's the thing. Patty Mills is an undersized guard. He he's aggressive defensively. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and fault him. He's aggressive defensively. Is he the best defender? No, but he gives us all on that end, and that's all you can really ask. As far as Lonnie Walker goes, I just said a few minutes ago, and I'll say it again. He needs to be consistent in those minutes. Everyone was calling for Lonnie to start. I said it on the Spurs cast early when it came out. I would love for Lonnie to start. I would love for Lonnie to take Brent Forbes' minutes away, but he needs to prove he's ready to start. And 28 points, yes, he's ready to start, but can he do it consistently? Tonight was that the second game after his breakout game. He did not play well either end of the court. So to me, that means he's going to be in Pop's, I'm not going to say doghouse as he plays, but he's going to be one of those role players that is going to have to find his way back into this, find his way to earn Pop's trust to play him
yep.
more. He played 34 minutes or 24 minutes, whatever it was, in Wednesday's double overtime game. He played 11 today, and Pop played Marco over him. Why? Because Marco was playing better.
Not only
And
that, but maybe Lonnie needed some rest. Pop thought, after he
yeah,
played all those minutes going into a double
yeah,
overtime
but Lonnie's
victory.
young.
Yeah,
Lonnie's young. Lonnie's a young player. Let's not really make excuses there. It could be that. I'm not disputing and say it's not, but I don't want to make that excuse when I personally don't think it is. Lonnie looked like
yeah.
he was ready to go tonight early. So I just think it was a bad game from him. I still say he's not ready, and I don't mean that in a negative way. And I know Spurs Twitter is probably going to come for me now, but it's okay. I mean, I just don't think he's ready in that sense of to be one of those starting unit players next to DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. We talked about it before. I want to see DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Lonnie Walker, Bryn Forbes, DeMar, all out there playing together. You're right, and I left off LaMarcus Aldridge for a reason, because I do agree with you. The Spurs are better without him. But unfortunately, LaMarcus and DeMar are both going to be here, I think, until their contracts run out. So that's what I see.
Yeah, I think they're gonna have to make a decision sooner or later about either one of these players because they have their future at stake. And if you're gonna keep on running with LA, you already know what's gonna happen. And the same thing goes with DeMar DeRozan. You already know what's gonna happen with both these players. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing with the Spurs is who's out there that's better, and can kind of come in under the budget. That think that's one of the key things as well that we got to remember because you're working with all these types of salary caps and Spurs don't really want to go over because the more you go over the more luxury tax you got to pay. They're already
Yeah,
over the cap, because of the bad decisions that they made. I think they're still paying, if I remember correctly, Paul Gasol as
yeah,
well.
they are. Yeah,
So bad
another bad
decisions.
contract.
Yeah, exactly. So, we'll just have to see how things pan out. I can't stress over things that I can't control. So the only
Mm-hmm.
thing that I'm going to do is worry about the here and now. And the Spurs need to find some consistency, both on their offense and on their defense. And
You want to know how inconsistent this team is, Joe? This is the first time they've won back-to-back games since October. It's December
that
right
is
now.
true. That is true. And remember, the season started back in October, so That goes to
Hmm.
show you we're going way back. It's like a flashback, like today's game was, over there at the AT&T Center. It was a flashback Friday. Uh,
You should play the Flash Gordon theme for that.
yeah, for real. But moving forward, I just like to see the teams play a little bit more consistent. That has yet to be seen. I think the 5 days of rest will do them some good, and hopefully, in between those 5 days, they can find some time to go in there and maybe hold a practice or two, and try to work at those things that they know they need to work on. When you work together in practice, it
Hmm.
does help you. When you're going out there,
Yeah.
even if it's against warm-up teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers, which on paper should be an easy win. But again, we just never know with this Spurs team nowadays.
Hmm.
Could we see another game where they're going into overtime? Who knows? Stranger things have happened, and it wouldn't surprise me. But I think at this juncture, this team is finding out a little bit more about themselves, and they're seeing that they can come back when they go behind or they fall behind, especially going into that fourth quarter. They don't have to hang their heads and just say, "Oh, we're done." We're never going to come back because we can't get stops. No, they found ways to get the stops and go ahead and execute on the offensive end to get
Hmm.
themselves right back in it and send the game to OT. And they still found a way to win, especially
Yeah.
in that overtime period. So this is something that they can hang their hats on, even though it was an ugly win, one of the ugliest wins of the season. There were some positives that they can take away from this. One being, if they play defense, good things happen,
Yeah.
and we saw that. So they just have to realize that the Spurs system, once again, only works when they can play defense. Now, we're not asking them to play championship defense like they did in years
Yeah.
past because they just don't have the personnel to do so. But you can put forth the effort, and that will set you up with opportunities to win games, especially close games like we saw in tonight.
You
Uh,
know,
Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, that one thing I've noticed, Joe, over this past week and a half of watching the Spurs team, as inconsistent as they have been, and I'm talking beating the Clippers, losing by 34 to Detroit, beating Houston, beating Sacramento, but it was an ugly win. This Spurs team can be a playoff team if they get their act together and start putting together some winning wins and get a winning streak going and just play consistently. This team can make the playoffs. No, they're not going to go win a championship or be the number one seed, but they are a playoff team if they can get their stuff together. And I'm just interested to see if they can, because if they can, I wonder what the reaction of Spurs fans would be who are expecting a lottery, who are expecting a top 10 pick. That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, I think they'll figure things out. They were much in the same situation
Hmm.
last year. In December they went on a tear and they were able to string together some wins. They had one of their better months in the month of December. And I think that we're going to see the similar effort in this month of December. And hopefully, the Spurs will string together some wins and start figuring some things out. Now, the one person who needs to figure some things out, I think, is Coach Pop, because Coach Pop needs to dial in, that's whatever that lineup's going to be, with whatever those rotations are going to be. You need to have some sense of normalcy in order to have that comfort level, to have that cohesiveness, that so the team can gel together and give themselves better opportunities to win games. I think
Hmm.
when you're switching these rotations and these lineups from any given night, to go ahead and match up better with other teams, you're taking kind of that flow out of the offense and defense away. So I think it's time that he kind of dials those things in a little bit and finally gives us a set rotation or a set lineup from night in, night out, like most teams in the NBA have. So
Hmm.
I think that's kind of overdue. I just think it was Coach Pop trying to really dial things in and figure this team out, because maybe it was a big question mark to him as well. He didn't know who he could trust yet.
Yeah.
He just has these veterans out there that he knows, if I play these guys, I know that they're going to give me what I want. But now he's starting to, kind of see that these young guys are starting to come into their own, which is great for us Spurs fans. We wanted this team to get younger and more exciting. And, sure enough, they did that against the Houston Rockets. And it's something to be excited and something to look forward to in these upcoming games. Let's let's take a look and see what happens with these young guys. I like me some Jakob Portal, man. Jakob Portal's
Yeah.
been outstanding defensively, and he's much improved from when he came into the to the Spurs system last year in that Kawhi Leonard trade. So looking forward to seeing how he flourishes, and I also want to see how Trey Lyles does as well. I think he was a good pickup for the Spurs.
Hmm.
Great young player as far as his defense goes, and the numbers don't really tell you everything you need to know. Pretty much just like Jakob Portal's stats on any given night. He might not be the guy that's going to put up 20 something points a night, but damn, he gives you a good effort on that defensive end, and that's what's missing from this Spurs team. I think Jakob kind of energizes them a little bit. So it's exciting, to see when he's out there on the court
Hmm.
and just how the dynamic changes for this team from a defensive standpoint. I love it, and I think Coach Pop
Yeah.
does too. So anything you want to add in closing, Stephen?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. I mean, like I said, this team deserves a break, and I'm just interested to see this next stretch for them. This whole month of December is an opportunity for them to make up what they couldn't do in the first 2 months of the season and kind of ride a nice streak, a nice winning form. And hopefully that's a sign of things to come in 2020 for the Spurs. I mean, I know we're not exactly into the new year yet, but I mean, hopefully this month of December can be a sign of good things to come and turning at the page in what's been a very up and down, frustrating first half of the season.
Yeah, no doubt. But I think, if we're patient here, I think things will get better for us. We'll just have to, I guess, reconvene and gauge this team again coming the month of January. Specifically, that second week of January is when I'll have a better determination of
Yes.
the direction of this team because it's right before the rodeo road trip and we're getting closer to that halfway mark of the NBA All Star break. So that's going to be the month that Spurs fans really need to look forward to. And that week, remember that second week of January, that's going to be the time that's going to tell you, really what you need to know about this team as far as records go. Let's see how they look on paper because I bet you anything they're going to almost be a mirror image of where they were last season. And Spurs fans are going to be, oh, this team isn't going to be making the playoffs, and they just might surprise you. Stranger
Yeah.
things have happened.
Yeah,
Uh,
I saw people on Twitter like, oh, that they're tanking last season. They're tanking.
yeah,
Oh, they're
tank for
tanking.
Zion. It was tank for Zion.
Yeah. And now, and then at the end of the season, well, I guess they weren't tanking, were they? So, I mean,
Yeah,
it's just a matter of, I mean, Pop is not, let's just put it out there right now, Joe. The Spurs are not going to tank. Pop is not going to and the definition of tank is willingly lose on purpose. Pop is not that coach. He never has been that coach. He never will be that coach. Now, if the Spurs guys actually give up on him as a coach, is a completely different story, like we saw in New York with Dave Fizdale.
oh
But
man.
yeah, that's a completely different issue that we can talk about all night, which I really don't feel like doing. So, but yeah, Pop and the Spurs will never tank. If they're losing, it's because they just don't have what it takes to win those games because they're not a good team as constructed right now. But they're not going to tank. So let's just drop that conversation, please.
Yeah, so in closing here, Steven, where can they get a hold of you and all the great content that you're cranking out for, Project Spurs and Project Spurs Network?
You guys can follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook at the Stephen A underscore. That's Stephen with the PH. I cover everything from San Antonio Spurs, San Antonio Rampage, SAFC Soccer, UIW, UTSA, everything under the sun that is San Antonio sports. You guys can follow me and also follow the Project Spurs Network at Project Spurs Net on all of our social media platforms. And I will say, be kind, be nice, and I always give respect to everyone who follows me, and I give it back. So that's about it.
Yeah, and you can also follow me, Joe Garcia. I'm at Two Shots Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Yes, make sure you go and subscribe to our YouTube channel to see the past episodes of the Spurs Takeover and the past episodes of the Two Shots Podcast. And it's all spelled out TWOSHOTS Podcast. Again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So for Steven Anderson, I'm Joe Garcia. Thank you for watching another episode of the Spurs Takeover. And like we always say, spread the love, stop the hate, be kind. We're out. Peace.